Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Chris Lawrence and I'm Community Manager at Zintro. For those of you not familiar with Zintro, Zintro is a global online marketplace that helps connect companies with highly specialized consultants and other expertise providers for projects that range from 1-hour phone consults to multi-month on-site engagements. I would like to thank the over 900 people who signed up for today's webinar, Why Most Consultants Bite. Attend this webinar before you spend money on an expensive advisor by David A. Fields. It is with great pleasure I introduce Zintro expert David A. Fields, Managing Director at the Ascendant Consortium, author, speaker, and consultant specializing in maximizing the return of investment from consulting engagements. David is one of the world's leading authorities on using outside experts such as consultants, coaches, and agencies. He is the author of the highly acclaimed book, The Executive's Guide to Consultants, writes monthly columns for Industry Week and Consulting Magazine, and has contributed to CNN Money, USA Today, Investors Business Daily, and dozens of other leading publications. Both sides of the client-consultant relationship love David's work. He's regularly hired by savvy corporations including Time Warner, Abbott Labs, ITT, and dozens of others to help them get the most out of their investments in outside experts. He also works directly with hundreds of consulting firms every year to help them win more projects that are highly lucrative for their clients and for them. If you would like to ask David any specific questions, feel free to use the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel in the top right corner of your screen at any time throughout the webinar. David will respond questions after this presentation. We will provide David's contact information at the end of this webinar for follow-ups, so stay tuned. Without further ado, I would like to turn it over now to our presenter, David A. Fields.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm practically blushing after hearing that introduction, and thank you to the hundreds of folks who are on the call right now and are going to be watching it. I know that we're limited in the number of people who could be on it live, and there are going to be hundreds watching this, so thank you for watching it. I also understand from some polling data that we got earlier that there's a mix of consultants and clients on this call, which is awesome. But I'm going to gear the entire presentation toward the client side. This is really about how you buy consulting services better. And let me just give you a moment of background, and then we'll dive right in. As Chris mentioned, I run the Ascendant Consortium. And at Ascendant, we're essentially what we are is we're general contractors. We bring in the consultants to do whatever's necessary, and corporate clients call us because they know they're going to get an outstanding project every single time. And so our expertise is actually the business of consulting. We've spent years analyzing hundreds and hundreds of projects to understand what makes them go right or not go so well. And that's what this presentation is based on. And so here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to describe this whole world of hiring outside experts and how that's working out for clients. And then I'll touch on a few reasons, why most consulting projects don't live up to expectations. And that's all going to be very quick, because where I really want to spend the most time is right here, is on the top 10 reasons that you, as a client, buy what I call cranberries. I refer to most consulting projects as cranberries because they taste sweet at the beginning, but then they kind of leave this bitter aftertaste. At least they do for me. At any rate, it's just a metaphor. So the key question is, what can you do that will help you not buy cranberries and guarantee for yourself really a fabulous outcome every time you bring in an outside expert? And the plan is to get through all of this in, call it 35 minutes. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get through this in 35 minutes or so, 40 minutes, which will leave us a good 20 minutes for Q&A. Oh, by the way, I do want to give you a heads up that during this webinar, there are going to be two extremely brief breaks. So that I can just give you a little bit of background on what I do in Ascendant and that kind of thing. And one's going to be right in the middle of this section here, and the other I'll do right now, because I'm going to be just scratching the surface of how to maximize your investment when hiring outside experts. And if you spend as a company more than, I don't know, like $2,500 per year on consultants or coaches or trainers or other outsiders, and most companies are spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on consultants, then the $25 investment in this book is going to give you about a bazillion ROI. And the link here will just send you right to Amazon. And that's it. That's it for that. So let's talk about what the deal is with consultants. Consultants get a bad rap because when you bring in outside experts, and you know, it can be really frustrating, and sometimes you get very marginal value from it. And let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, one of the world's largest technology companies decided it was underutilizing its patent portfolio. And the senior executive team hired one of the best-known, most prestigious consulting firms in the world to help figure out where to leverage all these assets that they've got. And then 6 months later, after spending well into the millions of dollars, seven figures, they had a list. The consultant came back with a list of recommended markets. But the problem is, once the operating teams dug into the recommendations a bit, they realized that not a single one was viable. Not one. How much does that bite? It's an incredible waste of time and money. And the real drag, from my standpoint, is that this plays out every day in companies of all sizes. I see it all the time. And there has been some research on this. There's some pretty widely quoted research that indicates around 90% of projects don't come in on time, on target, or on budget. At 90%, which means that the average project is getting like an F, and that's not so swift. And I'm very curious what the experience is of the audience. So, and you folks who are listening. So feel free to just type your experience in the chat box and say, how's it worked out for you? What I've seen suggests that this heavily cited research is actually sensationalizing it a little bit. It appears to me that the average consulting project delivers about a B. Occasionally one is great. More often one is very disappointing. But overall they're okay, I suppose. What they're not doing is knocking it out of the park. And in fact, enough are missing the mark that it's still a big risk to bring in a consultant. Because the occasional C or a D or an F will cripple you. I mean, it can cripple you as a company, and as an individual, as a manager, as an executive, it can really create a black mark for you and on your career. So let's talk about why these C's and D's and F's and even the B's happen. And why is it that most consultants bite? And to illustrate the first reason, I'm going to go back a lot of years ago to when I was new in consulting and working inside a boutique firm. And we were down in New Jersey, we were kicking off a project, and after a couple of hours of meeting with the client for this kickoff, we left to head back up to Connecticut. And in the parking lot, before we even got into the car to drive home, the lead consultant on the project said, we've broken the back of this project. I've got it completely figured out. And that was after 2 hours. You see, consultants are problem solvers. It's in their genetic makeup to solve problems, and that's great, except that then they have a propensity to jump to conclusions. And often it's a conclusion that's based on the most recent project they did for another client. And then they defend those conclusions to the hilt. So that's one problem. Another issue, and I hear this all the time, especially about career consultants who join a big firm out of school and then advance through the ranks, is that they don't have any real relevant operating experience. And And that was the situation with that was the problem with that situation I was just talking about with that technology company that was leveraging their patents. Because what you want is not just smart, those people are smart. You want a result that will actually translate into bottom line progress for you. Okay, on top of that, there are some structural problems in most projects. And I'm going to cover that more a bit later. But I will tell you that one of the most prestigious, well-known consultancies in the world is on record for having driven more than one of their client companies into bankruptcy. And you know what their penalty was for that? Nothing. They were paid handsome fees, and they received those fees regardless of the outcome, which is clearly a problem. In addition, consultants have this can-do attitude. And that's great, but it can lead them astray. And I can't tell you how many consultants I've interviewed who present themselves as the perfect choice for my clients. But then I dig deeper, and it turns out they've never actually produced the outcome ever that my client's looking for. And so, is it any wonder that that kind of consultant produces a B result at best? It certainly isn't to me. Okay, let's look at a couple of other reasons consulting projects don't go well. One particularly insidious problem, it's very evident, I see it a lot in the IT business, because while a consulting project might be a couple $100,000, a systems integration could be like millions of dollars or tens of millions. So what the large IT companies have done is they've purchased consulting groups, and they're using them as a front end to sell their large integration projects. But it's not just in IT. There's always a strong bias to use consulting as a sales channel if the corporate parent has any kind of back-end services. Now, interestingly, on the flip side, there can actually be a short-term bias. And you see these in projects, and this can also generate absolutely disastrous results in the long term. I think we all saw this, probably everybody on this call has been around long enough to remember not very long ago when consultants were hired to find cost savings, and they were being paid on a percentage of the savings that they turned up. And so what happened is that they cut services, and they cut personnel, and they cut R&D, and they did all this streamlining. And then when the economy turned around, their clients were totally unprepared to respond because they didn't have the personnel or the new products in the pipeline. And then then they lagged their competitors, then they fell behind. So sometimes when there's this strong short-term incentive, it leads to poor recommendations. Okay, so those are 6 reasons why consultants can bite. They jump to conclusions, they don't have operating experience, their fees aren't tied to results, they take projects on they have no business taking, and they're biased either because of the long-term sale or short-term wins. But you know what the #1 driver is of mediocre projects more than anything else? It's lousy hiring practices on the part of the client. As you can tell, as you've heard, I am no apologist for consultants. I think consultants could do a lot better. However, if you're a client and you're not overjoyed with the results from a project, the first place to look is internally. And I don't blame clients because, frankly, they don't hire consultants very often, maybe a few times a year. But what is on clients is thinking they know how to make good hiring decisions when it comes to consultants, even though they have very little practice at it, and the results clearly show that most projects are anything but outstanding. So that brings us really to the meat of this presentation, which is the top 10 reasons why clients buy cranberries, and really importantly, what can you do to prevent them? So at this point, we're talking about you if you're a client, we're talking about you as a buyer, and everything I'm about to show you is the mistakes that clients make day in and day out. And I'm going to show you how to avoid these. And the way I've structured this, I'm actually going to run through 5 very common mistakes and then give you a framework and a few tips to avoid them. Then we'll do a brief break. I want to just tell you what Ascendant does, then I'll cover the remaining 5. So that's the plan. Oh, and before I forget, I have prepared a special free download for the folks on the Zintro call. Just go to the link on the screen here, and you can download it. It's a free project success checklist. And this checklist has a whole bunch of things I'm not even covering on this webinar, because right now we're focused on hiring consultants well. And the checklist is going to help you run a successful project once the consultant is hired. Okay, so let's actually dig in. The number one most common mistake I see clients make is that they focus on their situation rather than their outcome. And as a result, they hire situation expertise instead of outcome expertise. So let me give you a couple of examples. Situation expertise sounds like this. We're a fashion company and we need a website. So that's a description of the situation. And that client will call me and say they're looking for someone to build a website that has fashion expertise. Or we're a tech company and we have leadership problems. And that client calls and they say, David, we need a leadership expert with tech experience. And it kind of makes sense, right? It's very, very common. It's also a mistake. What that fashion company really wants is increased online sales. So rather than looking for a website expert with fashion experience, they should be looking for consultants who have increased online sales. And that could be a website guru, or it could be someone else, maybe has an entirely different breakthrough approach and may or may not have worked in fashion. In the tech company, for example, their outcome might be lower attrition and higher morale. So maybe they need a tech expert, but it's just as likely, or maybe even more likely, that they'll do better with some kind of killer consultant who's never worked in tech, but has created zero turnover and sky-high morale in other companies. Because as a buyer, your company is already it's teeming with experts in your industry and situation. And so what you need is outcome expertise. And when you marry your knowledge of your industry and your situation with the consultant's ability to produce an outcome, then that's when you get kind of like an A+ instead of a B or a C. So that's that. A similar mistake to focusing on the situation rather than the outcome is focusing on tactics rather than outcomes. And a tactic sounds like this. Tactic will be like, David, we'd like someone to run a sales program on spin selling. Or, David, you have a consultant who can develop a market appraisal. Those are activities. They're actions and tactics. And the problem with focusing on tactics is you get tactics. When you ask for a training, you get a training. And that may or may not help you get where you want to be, which is, say, a short sales cycle. When you ask for a market appraisal, that's what you'll get. And you're hoping it will tell you whether to enter the market or not. But imagine it, let's say you ask the consultant to help you make a smart decision. That opens the door to the consultant doing whatever is necessary to get you that outcome. And that's where the real win is. Okay, another major reason consulting projects don't measure up is because they have nothing to measure up to. When I conducted research, and I talk to executives all the time about consulting projects and ask them how projects went that they didn't do with us, and they give me replies like these. They say, well, it was pretty successful, or we achieved most of what we had hoped, or I think it could have gone a bit better, something like that. And they're all really fuzzy and vague and not based on any clear metric. And you see, it's not enough to know where you want to go, what your desired outcome is. It also needs to be clear when you get there. And that's how you know your consultant is delivering or not delivering. Unfortunately, most projects don't have clear metrics of success in place. I have seen multi-million-dollar projects with no success metrics in them. Without clear metrics of success, you're basically just hoping for good results. Okay, so what I've covered so far, you've probably heard a lot about. The next reason for these cranberries is just as common, but it's definitely less well explored by both sides, by consultants and by clients, and that's leaving risks unmanaged. This is really a largely unexplored area in consulting. Every project has risks, and for the most part, they're simply embedded in the project. Sometimes they're actually where they're embedded is in the fees. But one way or another, your risks as a buyer and the consultant's risks are in the project. And there are 20 or 30 common risks in consulting projects, such as the project doesn't work, or it doesn't deliver the value you're expecting, or it misses key dates, or maybe the consultant alienates some personnel inside your company, which that would never happen. And there's bunches more. But in 99% of projects, all these risks are left bundled into the overall approach and the fees, and they're not managed. And that's a huge opportunity. So we'll address that. But before we do, let's cover the final entry in this first batch, this first 5 reasons that clients buy cranberries, which is an undue focus on cost rather than value. Most clients focus on cost almost obsessively, and there are plenty of good reasons to look at cost, but it also leads clients to make hiring mistakes when it comes to consultants. And just think about your own behavior. What is the first section of a client's proposal that you turn to? It's probably the fees, because that's where almost everyone goes. They want to know, what's the bottom line? What's this going to cost? And then everything is put in relation to fees. Even though you're not hiring a consultant so that you can spend $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, you're hiring the consultant to achieve an outcome. But the first place that a client turns to is the fees. And also, they tend to compare day rates or hourly rates and those kinds of things, which for a whole bunch of reasons is typically a bad idea. Or they're comparing the cost of consultants to internal staff salaries, which is totally an apples to Oldsmobiles kind of comparison. And if you are going to compare a consultant to internal staff, then what you need to look at is the value created per total dollar invested. And another driver of this focus on cost has been the increasing use of purchasing departments who issue RFPs for consulting. And if you could purchase consulting the way you buy commodity products or services, I would be all for that. But unfortunately, you can't. There's just a huge world of difference. Nevertheless, purchasing groups focus on costs. So once again, there's an emphasis on costs rather than value. Okay, so those are the top 5 reasons that clients buy cranberries. They focus on situations versus outcomes and tactics rather than outcomes. There are unclear success metrics, unmanaged risks, and there's this focus on cost rather than on value. So here's the real question, is how do you avoid these? And so let me give you one simple structure that will help. And by the way, for all of you consultants listening, I advise you use the exact same structure. And this structure is what I call a context document. And I highly, highly recommend that you develop one before you contact any prospective consultants or trainers or coaches or experts of any kind. And the context document has 6 parts. The first part is the situation. And what's really important about the situation is what's changed. And why is it that all of a sudden now you either have a problem or you've got some aspiration you're trying to achieve. So what's changed, and then why do you need to go to the outside? Why can't you solve this yourself? The second part of the context document is what your desired outcome is. And an outcome, as we just discussed, is not a task. It's not your situation. It's not an activity. It's how you're better off at the end of the project. In what way is this project going to make a meaningful difference to you, to your company, to your customers to your employees. Part 3 of the context document is success metrics. It's making sure you will know when you get there. And I recommend that you follow this acronym called CRAVE with your metrics. CRAVE stands for concrete, reliable, attainable, valid, and engaging, which means that your metrics have to be concrete. They need to be something you can bite into. They have to be reliable. So when you measure it, you measure it 10 times, you get the result. It has to be data that you can actually attain, that you can actually achieve or have access to, so maybe accessible is better. Valid, and then engaging. There should be metrics that actually get your company moving. Part 4 of a context document is risks and concerns. What are your risks and concerns about this project? What could make it go wrong? What could make it fail? What could derail it? And what about using a consultant? What are your concerns? What do you see as the risks in using a consultant and bringing one in to your company to help you with this? Part 5 of the context document is the value. What is the meaningful impact on you or your business, your employees, or your customers? And if at all possible, and it's almost always possible, I've done this for a long time, I can tell you it's almost always possible to quantify this. There should be a meaningful, quantifiable impact on your business. And that's how you can make a smart investment decision. And it doesn't have to be precise. We're not looking for the third decimal point here. We're just looking for some estimate of value so that when you take a look at your investment, you can say, yeah, this makes sense. This is a great return. And the 6th part of the context document is simply parameters. Anything that puts boundaries on your project. Work with these people or not with those people. We have to hit these deadlines. We have a board meeting. We have this budget, or we're constrained within this fiscal year, or something like that. And you put all of that inside your context document. And then what you're going to do is you're going to share your context document with prospective consultants. And it tells them everything they need to know to develop an outstanding proposal. And yes, I am saying you share the whole thing, the parameters, the value, because a collaborative approach is going to benefit everyone. Now, similarly, I would avoid traditional, tactically specific, input-focused RFPs. RFPs are great for commodities and for products where you can specify the inputs or characteristics, but consulting doesn't work that way. I mean, a paperclip is always going to hold papers together. So an RFP process makes a ton of sense for something like that. It's a commodity. It always works. But a consultant doesn't always work. I mean, it may be working hard, but the outcome doesn't always come through. They may or may not deliver against what you need. And so an RFP can actually end up steering you in totally the wrong direction. Also, I recommend that during the negotiation process, you reallocate risks, both yours and the consultants. This is a huge and really easy way to increase your expected return on your consulting dollars. But the overall takeaway, what I really want you to walk away from this webinar with more than anything, if you're on the client side, is to focus on outcomes. You are in the business of achieving an outcome. And as long as you focus on that, you're going to experience much better results when you hire some sort of outside expert. As I put on this slide here, a very small improvement in your ultimate outcome will pay for a huge increase in costs. Okay, so look, now we're halfway through this 10 reasons why clients buy cranberries. I've given you the context document and also a few other tips. And we're going to do a really brief break so I can just give you an overview of what the Ascendant Consortium does. And look, when companies bring in outside help, this is typically the process that they go through. They decide they need help, they do draft RFPs and look for vendors and blah, blah, and eventually they work the project. And as we've seen, as the research shows, when companies go through that, typically they're getting about a B result. It's kind of mediocre. At the Ascendant Consortium, what we are all about is getting to an A+, and that's what we deliver. So we have ways of going through these steps that we perfected because it's what we do day in and day out that creates a better outcome. And if you are on the client side and you'd like to know more about this, of course, I'm delighted to talk with you about it. Just give a call and I'll tell you more about how we hire consultants and help you use them more effectively. Also, just before I move on, I want to give a quick heads up because there are a lot of consultants listening. Over the next few weeks, you'll be able to sign up for a course that Zintro is sponsoring called the Client Acquisition Formula. This is the single best program for consultants I have ever offered. The participants in this have ranked this off the charts, and Zintro is going to be giving a special one-time only opportunity to join a group that's going to go through this program to set up 2015 for success. So I'm just kind of planting the seed. Keep your eyes open for that. Okay, let's cover 5 more reasons why clients buy cranberries when they're hiring consultants, and then I'll give you some recommendations, and then I want to open it up for Q&A. I want to make sure there's time to answer questions. If you have questions, please type them into the chat box. Okay, so let's look at these 5 more reasons. Reason number 6 is hiring end-to-end. Now, this seems like a great idea sometimes, but it's really not. Having one consultant take you all the way from figuring out what to do through developing a plan and then implementing it, that sounds great. But here's the reality. No firm or person is excellent at everything. They simply can't be. And also on top of that, back-end expertise biases the front end of a project. And you really need to be careful there. So I recommend you split strategy, plan, and implementation. You don't have to hire 3 consultants by any means, but if you are determining what to do, making some sort of decision, and you want outside help to bring you all the way through implementation, you should have at least 2 different firms involved, and that gets rid of that bias. The next big reason is that clients put all their eggs in one basket. There's still a lot of risk when you hire a consultant. And a mistake on the part of a consultant could be a disaster for the company. It could be a disaster for you personally. And there's a really easy way to mitigate this risk. And that's by creating a pilot project, if at all possible. And that could be one division, it could be one iteration or one market, or even a small phase. And I do this all the time. I do it with my own business. I do it with my clients' businesses. And then you do that pilot with 3 firms. And if you hire 3 consultants instead of 1 to do a pilot project, and then you choose the best one, your project actually only needs to deliver a 1% better outcome at the end. Only has to produce 1% more value at the end to pay out the extra cost. That's it. Okay, great. Let's just hit the last 3 reasons. Reason number 8 is that clients look for a traditional waterfall approach. And in a traditional project, what that means is a consultant comes in and they'll do this in-depth assessment of the situation, and then make this big presentation, make the recommendations, and then they go away for some more time and they develop detailed plans, and then after that you get months and months of implementation. That's traditional. And in my experience, about 90% of projects use that kind of traditional approach, especially when you get outside the worlds of IT and Agile and innovation. Yet 90% of projects would actually do better with a more iterative approach. So my recommendations are to use an iterative approach, what I call a C to a B to an A, and make iterative, make flexible the name of the game when you're hiring consultants. And by the way, that's another reason that being task-focused and using a traditional RFP doesn't work terribly well, because they don't fit well with a flexible approach. The next reason clients buy cranberries, really easy to correct. Clients don't check references. They get all warm and fuzzy with a consultant. The material looks good, the case studies look good, the client list looks good, and so they go, oh, okay, yeah, great, let's go. That's a big mistake. I highly recommend you get at least 5 references, including at least one reference from a client who had a project that did not go well. That's why I put 4 plus 1 there. 4 good ones, 1 bad one. Because if your project is of any kind of scale, I can guarantee you that it won't go completely smoothly. And what you need to know is that how does a consultant deal with that? And how have they handled a project that went south? And if a consultant can't give you a single project or client that didn't go well, I wouldn't use them because they're either not being open and honest or they haven't been in the business long enough. It's the same as the investment world. The top investors know you never go with management that hasn't failed at least once, and I would use the same philosophy here. And also, make sure you're getting reference for the specific consultants who will be on your project, not the firm as a whole. The firm doesn't matter. What you're looking for is how these particular consultants done. Okay, let's round things out with the last reason clients hire consultants poorly and get poor results. And that is they use the wrong pricing structure. And that is worth a minute because at this point, most consulting projects are being contracted on an hourly or daily rate. And in most cases, that is not the best way to hire a consultant. And well, I don't have time to go into great depth in the pricing structures here, but I know there's always questions on this. So let me give you a framework and a couple of notes that will help you make much better hiring decisions. First, think of consulting fees as being determined either based on time or on value. In most cases, consultants are hired for fees that are determined based on time, which is a mistake because that doesn't align the consultant's interests with your interests. Your objective, as we've been discussing, is to get an outcome. It's to create value. And when you hire consultants with fees on that basis, then they're aligned to your goals. And that doesn't mean you have to pay them a percentage, by the way. It just means you have to create some alignment. The other way to think about fees is based on when those fees are determined. They can either be determined before the project is started, in which case they're fixed, or they can be determined after the project's done, in which case they're variable. So if you take these kind of 2 dimensions, you get a very easy quadrant chart. And down here, you've got variable time and materials. And over here, you've got fixed cost projects that are based on time. And up here, you have fixed value-based projects. And over here, you have success fees, or skin in the game. And like I said, there's a lot more to this than I can go into here. But what I will tell you is that the fee structure you want most often is a hybrid, right here, right where I put this gold star. And the one fee structure to avoid at all costs, because it is the single worst fee structure for everyone involved, is down here. It's called a variable fee with a cap. I see this all the time. It drives me crazy. But I will never, ever let any of my corporate clients enter into that kind of fee structure. It might seem like a good idea. It's bad news. It's bad news on all fronts. So there you go. That's the top 10 reasons why clients buy Cranberry projects, along with some tips to help you do a better job. So let me summarize what I've covered, and then you will handle any Q&A. If there's no Q&A, I'll send you on your merry way. But I wanted to make sure there was plenty of time for that. So first, create a context document before reaching out. And a context document has 6 parts. It has a situation, which is what's changed and why you need a consultant. It talks about what your desired outcome is. That's extremely important, and what the indicators of success are, what any risks are, what concerns you have about the project and about bringing in a consultant, what the value of the project is, and any parameters. And always, always, always focus on the outcomes. Keep your eye on the outcomes, not situations or not the activities, not the cost. Maintain your flexibility in your approach and your vendors by using the right approach, using an iterative approach, a C to a B to an A, run pilots when you can. Don't hire end-to-end. That is not the path to excellence. get real references, and by the way, check them. It's not enough to get them. You have to check them. Either you or someone who's used to doing this should be actually making the calls. And finally, use the right fee structure. And there you go. That's like a whole day worth of material I managed to do, I think, in about 30 minutes, just right in that range, maybe 35. So let's turn it to Q&A and make this more interactive. Chris, you're looking at the board. Did any questions come in? Were there any questions? What are you seeing?
Yes, David. We have been receiving questions along the way, but first I would like to say, Zintro members, feel free to contact David directly with the information provided or by going to his Zintro profile. We will keep this webinar session open for another 15 to 20 minutes so David can respond to questions by our attendees. I will hand it over now to Enrique for the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, David, we have a couple of questions, well, more than a couple of questions. I'll try to go through them quickly. So the first one is by Felix. Felix is asking, what is one thing we can do right away to not be the consultants that bite?
Oh, so Felix is a consultant.
Yes.
So this is a great question. So this is how to not bite. Right? As a consultant, I love that. And here's my recommendation. First, be good at what you do. So have something that you do and be the best in the world at it. That's a specialty. And so be the best in the world at that, and don't take on projects that you shouldn't take on. I know there's a great temptation to do everything, and you feel like you're leaving money on the table if you don't take a project that, well, maybe you could do. And I often joke that the three most important words in consulting are, yes, I can. But yes, I can get you in some real trouble. It doesn't help your clients. So, focus, be great at something, and that's how you don't bite. The other thing I would say is master the context document and master the discussion that leads to that document, because most clients don't know it, and they will benefit from walking through those 6 steps. And when you walk through those 6 steps with them, you are going to be in a position to succeed. Everything else is easy. Everything else is easy. The hard part is when and you know this if you're a consultant, is so many clients call you and they're thinking about their situation. They have not figured out how do they measure success. What is the value? What could go wrong? So if you do that, that's a good start. Specialize, really know what you're doing, and be the best in the world at it. Be great at it. You don't have to be different. You just have to be great. And really master the context document, the context discussion.
Okay, thank you. We have another question by David. David is asking, developing the CRAVE and context document will require someone to do a lot of research into areas that our in-house people may not know. How can this be managed?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely, or I guess I would push back. It's the context document. Let me actually go up a couple of pages, a note here. So what's changed, that doesn't require research. A line is down, attrition is up, morale is down, we bought somebody, we've had a merger. These things are all evident. Or we've decided we want to go into a new market, we've decided we want to bring in a new customer relationship. These are decisions. Why a consultant also doesn't take a lot of research or work. We're good at it, we're not good at it. We don't have the expertise. We value a third-party point of view. We don't have the time. A lot of it is you just don't have the expertise. You haven't done it a lot of times. So that doesn't take much research. What's the desired outcome? No research on that. You know what your outcome is. Our outcome is reduced attrition. It's higher morale. It's the ability to make a smart decision. The outcome is all of our folks are on the same system, something like that. So that doesn't take a ton of research. The indicators of success, again, not a lot of research. Every single outcome has at least one indicator of success. Does it take some thought? Yes. Does it take a little practice to do these well? Yeah, but it doesn't take a team of underlings. What are the risks and concerns? Again, this, for the most part, most executives know when they think about it. Well, one risk is our engineering department will balk at having some outside experts come in. Or we're concerned that we might miss key dates. Or we're concerned that, I mean, there are a million concerns, at least 20 to 30 really common ones. And these are listed actually sitting right in my book, most of these. And so it doesn't take a lot of research. You go down the book and say, oh, do we have this one? Do we have this one? Do we have this one? The value is the one that's trickiest. It doesn't take huge amounts of research. It can take some. It can take a little bit of effort depending on what type of project you're doing and what the focus is. But again, we're not looking for precision here. You're looking almost for Fermi estimation. You're looking for an order of magnitude. Is this $1 million value to the company, or is it $1 billion value to the company? And it doesn't matter. It matters less that you have 1.25 million than that you have 1 million versus 10 million versus 100 million versus a billion. If we get this line to be more efficient, maybe what's more efficient? Maybe it's 5%. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 6%. And ultimately, that will make a big difference. But for the purposes of making an investment in a consultant, we're in the right range, 3, 4, 5%. We'll call it 4%. What would that mean? And that doesn't take a huge amount of effort. So I guess I would push back, and parameters are easy, and say it doesn't take a huge amount of effort to develop a context document. What it does take is focus in the right places. Okay?
Thanks, David. We have another question by Rick. Rick is asking, is it wise to hire consultants to do a sales job?
Is it wise to hire consultants to do a sales job? I'm not sure I would call that consulting, because consultants are there really to advise you, to take you in the right direction. There's 3 things a consultant can do. They can either help you with a decision, they can help you develop a plan. So the decision is we're going to go here, we're going to go there. The plan is how you're going to get there, and then they can help you with implementation. Those are the only 3 outcomes that are valuable from consulting. So if they're helping you with sales, they might help you with your process, which is along here. They're advising you. The other thing is that's from a project with an outcome. The other thing is just plain advice. So a consultant could advise you how to do it better. Could train your company how to do it better. I go into consulting firms all the time and teach them how to do this, how to do sales better. When you're hiring someone to actually do the sales for you, I'm not sure that that's consulting per se, but even so, it depends on the type of business you're in. The manufacturers very often hire brokers, and the broker business is a common business, and brokers are professional salespeople, and they carry a bag, and they represent a lot of companies, and you get a lot of efficiencies that way. So that works well. In the business of consulting, it doesn't work so well, because consulting is built on trust. And the reason the big clients come back to me over and over and over and over again is because they know we always deliver. There's trust there. So I'm not sure that answers the question. If not, just type in another question and we'll answer it as we go.
Thanks, David. We have another question by Alex. How can I better get prospects to understand and accept a value-based fee structure, pay % of some long-term target?
Okay. So this is another question from a consultant, and we're really going to be focused more on clients in this one. But a value-based structure, let me first push back and say value-based or success fees, you're talking about a variable. There's 2 different ways. Remember, you can do it fixed or you can do it variable. There's a fixed value-based fee, and the term value-based fees was probably first coined by Alan Weiss. That doesn't mean a % necessarily. It just means you're looking at the value and saying, a reasonable payment, reasonable return for us to be paid to deliver that value is a certain amount. And that gives you a 7-to-1 risk-adjusted return or 10-to-1 risk-adjusted return. Or there's success fees and skin in the game. And remember, I said the best place to be is here. Something that's based totally on a percentage of the savings is not actually good for either side. It puts too much pressure to deliver short-term wins. But the question of how to get clients to agree to that, I'd actually kind of like to table, because that's, this is focused. This is really for clients. What I will say that as a client, the reason you want to be up here on value as opposed to down here, which is on cost, is because you want yourself and the consultant focused on producing value. You want them focused on producing an outcome. And when you are focused on cost, you're going to be looking at activities. You're going to be looking at hours. You're looking at days. And that's not really why you're hiring someone. You're not hiring someone for hours. You're not hiring someone for days. You're hiring someone to produce an outcome. And the more flexibility you give to that consultant to produce that outcome, the better off you are. So, my consultants, for the most part, we work up here, as you would expect. I mean, this is where I put my clients, is in these types of projects. And we do whatever is necessary to deliver that A+. And we're doing that because we've been paid on a value basis. We're not worried about, is this going to be an extra hour? Is that going to be an extra hour? And you, as a client, aren't worried about it. You're not saying, I don't know, should I pick up the phone? That's a change of work. That'll be an extra hour. So that's not what you want. You want everybody to be focused right here on value. Okay? Enrique, what else?
Yeah, we have another question by Mauricio. I think it's partly a follow-up to what you were just explaining, David. He would like you to elaborate a little more on your value cost after before chart.
It would help to know what way to elaborate on it.
Yeah, Mauricio, if you're there, we would really appreciate a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, this is a construct. It's an easy construct for thinking about fee structures, because this is pretty much. There are other ways of looking at it that I offer, and there's another way in the book that looks at boundedness, whether a project is bounded or unbounded. But basically, this is best for consultants and for clients. And I will tell you, I am a big believer that what is best for consultants is best for clients. What's best for clients is best for consultants, because this is long term. I mean, I've been in this business a long time now. If you are a consultant, want to be in this business a long time, you have to produce value for clients. And the best way to do that is say, okay, we will be paid a fixed amount, a certain fee, based on achieving an outcome for you. And we'll do what it takes. And if we achieve it, we get a bonus. Now, usually you don't want that based on a percentage. What you want that based on is a discrete action-based binary kind of indicator. For instance, as a client, I would recommend, let's say you're hiring, we get hired to do an integration plan. And the way it was structured was we got paid a certain fee to the integration plan, and then we said the indicator of whether this is successful for you, whether you like it, whether you believe in it, whether we've delivered what you need, is that you use it. And so if you decide to use the plan, we get paid a bonus. It's a binary indicator. We either get it or we don't get it. And of course, we got the bonus. But that way, when the client is paying the bonus, they're paying more, but they're paying only after they've achieved a very, very high value outcome. And so the return for them is guaranteed. But we're not into any kind of conflict over measurement, and we're not in any kind of conflict over percentages, and we don't have to worry about getting into their books and looking at these kinds of things. So there are best practices for structuring success fees and these kind of hybrids. And some of it's in the book, and some of it, I teach elsewhere. Enrique, what else we got?
Yeah, we have another question by Tony. He's a consultant, and he asks, until a client learns about and actually goes through the process of a context document, how should consultants best manage the challenge of arching importance clients place on fees over the true value of consultant? And I think this question is valuable for both sides.
So how should we manage that?
Yes.
You manage that by just focusing on yourself and the client on the outcome and talking to the right people. So the focus on cost. So here's a typical organization, okay, right? You know, C-suite at the top, lots of workers here at the bottom. As you go down the organization, the focus on cost tends to increase, okay? So as you go down the organization, focus on cost tends to increase. And if you are not talking to the decision maker is the one who's experiencing the problem, the one who has the aspiration, then they're more likely to be looking at cost. If you're talking to the person who's actually suffering with the problem and deciding, then they're going to be more focused on the value. So talk to the right person. And that person, by the way, is usually not up here. That person's usually in here. So that's one thing. If you are dealing with a procurement department, they tend to be focused. And the way you deal with procurement departments is you say, I'm happy to talk with you, but I must talk with in order to deliver a proposal, I must also speak with the person who's actually going to be using this, or the people who are going to be using this. I would not respond to just RFPs, because you can't guarantee an outcome that's going to actually deliver against what they need. So you have to focus on value, and you have to talk to the people who are focused on value. And then that will help you get away from this cost mentality.
Okay, David,
thank you. One more?
Thank you very much. I think we're out of time. We have many more questions. I will forward them to you. So David will be following up after the webinar with pending questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact David. Chris, up to you.
David, on behalf of Zintro and our over 160,000 members, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And this closes today's presentation. I wish all of you a very nice day.